This silk ribbon and felt embellishment is easier to make than it looks. And today I'm going to show you how. Hi, this is Stephanie. I go by StampJG here on YouTube and at my blog at stampjg.com. And with 3 colors of silk ribbon and a couple of stitches that you might already know, this cover can be recreated with a beautiful result. So to start off, we'll discuss silk ribbon and we'll get into the stitches, so let's go. Silk ribbon is specifically made for embroidery, although you can use it for other crafts. It is made out of silk fibers that are woven together, generally in either Japan or China, and they come in several different standard widths. The main ones for embroidery are this one, which is 4 millimeters. And also 7 millimeters is the other standard size. You can also buy it in 2 millimeters, which is much smaller, and 13 millimeters, which is wider than even this. As you can see, it comes in a lot of beautiful, beautiful colors, and there are several different manufacturers that make this out there. It's getting a little hard to find right now, but here are some of the brands that I have in my stash. This one is River Silks, and all of these are 4 millimeter. Nope, I got some 7 millimeters in here. But you can see a beautiful range of colors. And these are 5 yards, 5.5 yards on each of these spools. These are by a company called YLI. These are made in Japan. And these are also 5 yards, and the few colors I have are 4 millimeters. YLI I don't think does variegated ribbon, I'm not sure, but I think River Silks does make solid colors as well as variegated colors. And then, of course, in my stash, where I'm not sure where I got these, here are some examples of variegated ribbons that I have in 7 millimeter, and this is just a solid one. And I'm not sure where I got these. There are some companies out there that over-dye the threads, over-dye the ribbon and sell them, and this is definitely a little more expensive than a skein of DMC floss, which you might get for what, 50, 60 cents. These end up being about $5 or $6. And I've seen River Silks run up to $8 for 5 yards. So it's definitely more expensive. You don't use as much as you would embroidery floss because you're only making, generally speaking, small embellishments with ribbon. Here, flowers or leaves or whatever. So it's nice to have. It's a beautiful dimensional embroidery technique. And they make a real statement. So I really like working with them, but you don't need all of these colors, and I have more somewhere, which we're not going to talk about. So what do you need to get started with silk ribbon embroidery? Well, of course you need silk ribbon, a pair of scissors, some needles, and the kind that are generally used with silk ribbon are chenille needles. These needles have a long eye and are pointed at one end so it can make holes in your fabric. Chenille needles in size 22 or 24 are generally the ones I use. And also these are very similar to tapestry needles. They have the same type of long eye as a tapestry needle, but a tapestry needle is not pointed at the end, it's more blunt. Because tapestry needles are generally used in like needlepoint or counted cross stitch or something where there's already holes in the fabric. Like an even weave fabric where the holes are, you don't need to make holes for it. So chenille needles have a point on the end. And then the other thing that you're going to need is some sort of tool that will help you control the ribbon as it's coming out, or if you need to curl it or something. So here I have 2 different types of needles. One's a yarn needle, and this one is a very large tapestry needle. It's blunt on one end, and it doesn't matter about the eye because you don't use the eye of it. You just need a long tool that will help you with the ribbon, either bringing it out of the hole and getting it flat, or pushing it down, or curling it sometimes. It's kind of helpful. It's not 100% necessary, but it might come in handy sometimes depending upon the types of flowers or leaves or what you're making. If you're a paper crafter, you may have an awl or one of these Tim Holtz tools, and that can be used. If you're a sewer, you might have a stiletto. And the other thing I wanted to point out before we go too much further is that silk ribbon is not necessarily available in any of the big box stores, but you might find it at a local needlework shop or a shop that specializes in needlepoint. You can find it online at Etsy. I think I mentioned like River Silks and YLI were some of the better known brands of silk ribbon. Thread Gatherer has some. Again, Etsy has some, and some of it might be hand dyed, so it'll be beautiful. And you only need a couple of rolls of it. You really don't need a large stash. So these are all that you need, and chances are you have a lot of this in your stash already, except for the silk ribbon, and you might be able to find that online somewhere very easily and just pick up a couple of colors that you really like for your project. Okay, when working with silk ribbon, again, like we stated, you need a needle that has an elongated eye so that your ribbon can fit through it. Now, one of the things that you'll find helpful when you're starting is to cut the end of your ribbon at an angle, just like that. This will help you thread your needle a little easier. Simple. Now, when working with floss, we're used to the tails kind of hanging over the edge of the eye, but you can see with with silk ribbon, this doesn't happen too well. And since silk ribbon is very prone to fraying and shredding, we need to attach the needle and the ribbon together by locking it. And here's how to do it. Now, I'm going to pull this out so that we have a short end and your long tail over here. So hold the very end of your short tail that you threaded through the eye of your needle in one hand, and then simply bring the point of your needle over to the edge about 1/4 of an inch in and pierce it. Not your finger, just the ribbon, just like this. So you kind of have it pierced on this end here, and it goes through the eye, and then take your long tail and pull it. And you'll notice that the short end will follow it until you give it a good yank on the end, and it locks on the end of your needle. Okay? And I will go over that one more time when we do some stitching. So you lock the end of your ribbon onto your needle, and this way this little tiny part will get shredded to pieces by the time you're done with your project. On the other end, you just tie a knot. Just a simple overhand, underhand, side hand, whatever kind of knot. But just a simple knot. And I hope I don't embarrass myself on camera here. Come on. And you can see how this end is already fraying and shredding. So, and then what I do is I will bring the knot all the way down as close to the end as possible to conserve ribbon. Whoops. And then just like that. So just one knot. That's all you need. Just the simple little regular overhand knot is all you need. It will secure the ribbon in your fabric. And then I'm going to cut off this little fray bit here for no other reason than I want to. The only other point I would make when working with silk ribbon is that you want to stay with shorter lengths. Not necessarily this short. This is just for demonstration, but 12 inches, maybe 16 or 17 inches, maybe 18 inches at the very most, because you don't want your ribbon to fray, because the more it goes through the holes in the fabric, the more the edges are going to want to fray, and the more that the there you might even have holes develop or something sometimes, depending upon how much stress you put on the ribbon. It's a sturdy ribbon, but it will fray after getting pulled through the fabric time and time again. So that's how you thread a needle. So now that we've covered some of the basics with silk ribbon embroidery, let's go ahead and learn some basic silk ribbon embroidery stitches. To get started with silk ribbon embroidery, there are a couple of very simple stitches to use that come out with really great results. There's, of course, endless numbers of stitches that you can do, but I have a couple that I'm going to show you today so that you can get started and make the project that we have here with this silk ribbon embroidery on the cover of this needle book. So I have a spider web or woven wheel rose here. Lazy daisy stitches are the leaves. And I have like a spider mum kind of thing over here. And these are twisted ribbon stitches and ribbon stitches with a couple of more lazy daisies. It's embellished with a few beads, and that's all there is to it. I wanted to show you a couple of these stitches, but I'm also going to leave in the description below a link to someone I really admire on YouTube who does a fantastic job. She is a professional hand embroiderer, and she does a beautiful job. And she has a playlist of silk ribbon embroidery stitches. I will leave that link in the description below. Her name is Sarah Humphrey, and she's from the UK, and she just has amazing work of all different kinds of embroidery. But she does have a playlist of how to do silk ribbon, so that if anything I say is confusing or isn't clear, you might want to go check out her channel, and specifically the playlist I'm going to leave below, so that you can see a professional do it. All right, to get started, we're going to start with a straight stitch. And I wanted to go over threading the needle again. I am using a size 24 Chanel needle, and I have about 16 or 17 inches worth of 4mm silk ribbon. I am going to cut an angle onto the very end of that ribbon so that I can thread it onto my needle. Hopefully, there we go. And now that I have the short end in one hand and the long tail over here on the right, and it's threaded through the needle, I am going to bring the needle to the very end, about 1/4 of an inch in the ribbon, and pierce it so that I have something like this. And then I'm going to pull the long end towards the eye, holding it firmly and not poking myself, and then just give it a really good yank. And this locks the needle, well, locks the ribbon onto the needle. And you can pull it down if you want, because this isn't going anywhere. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to tie just a regular overhand knot in the tail. And I am going to try to keep this knot as far down on this end as possible. It just helps conserve ribbon, that's all. And I'll give that a firm yank, and only one small knot like this is all you need. Okay, we're going to start with the straight stitch. And that is exactly what you might think. I'm going to come in from the back of the fabric, and I'm going to give it a good pull. And before I keep, this is one of the areas that you can think about using an alternate tool to help you control your ribbon. Sometimes when you have it come out let me get it this way. You want to make sure it's flat. So sometimes you just want to run this along the length, and I'm pulling it towards me, and then I'm going to pull it away from me, and I can actually hold it down with my thumb. If I want to. And then I'm just going to make a stitch. It's just like using it with floss. And I'm going to hold the end as I pull it through, because I want to control so that can you see this twist? You can kind of see this twist. I'm going to let go of my needle. I want to make sure that there's no twist in this because it's a straight stitch. So I'm just kind of guiding it down, and I'm doing this very slowly on camera, but then you just guide it back through and you have a straight stitch. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more and we'll do another one. So I will come up from the back and pull the ribbon through. And this is where you want to kind of control your twists early. I guess there's no other way to put it. And I'm pulling a little bit firmly, but not too firmly. And I can go like this with it. If you don't have a tool, you can kind of keep your finger there if you want. And then I'm just going to make a straight stitch. But I'm going to hold this down so that I can control the twist. So that there really just isn't any. There's a little bunching where it comes in and out of the fabric, but there's no twist. Okay? So a straight stitch is just a standard straight stitch. Now a ribbon stitch is something that generally you do with ribbon embroidery. It's harder to do. I don't think you can do it with floss. And it starts just like a straight stitch where you come up from the back. And again, you want to see if you can fan this out a little bit and pull it towards you. But with the ribbon stitch, you're going to lay your stitch down, lay your ribbon down, and instead of going back into the fabric, you're going to come at the length you want and pierce through the ribbon and go back through the fabric this way. So you're basically splitting your ribbon, and I'm going to come slowly so you can see what happens. And you can choose to twist it underneath so it's straight if you want, but you can kind of see this loop forming, right? I'll turn this a little bit so you can see. See, there's a loop forming here. And I'm just going to slowly pull from the underside. I'm pulling the ribbon very slowly, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to leave that little curl on the end of my ribbon, and that's a ribbon stitch. When you come up for your next stitch, I'm going to do another ribbon stitch. I'm going to come up from the back. You can pull it, but be very gentle. You don't want to pull this curl out because it'll just pull straight through and it'll look just like a straight stitch. So we're going to come, whoopsie, and if that happens, I'm using the end of my needle. I pulled it too hard. I told you I did exactly what I didn't want to do. And I won't fix it now. So let's try it again. We're going to set this down and I'm going to hold it straight with my thumb right up here. And then I'm going to loop it over. Oops, let's do this straight here. And then I'm going to pierce the ribbon. I'm going to go back through the ribbon here and go to the back of the fabric. And then when I pull, there's going to be this little loop that forms up at the top. See this little loop, and I'm just going to pull it until just a little curl remains. And you can leave a big curl like that or a little curl. You just have to be sure when you take your next stitch that you don't pull it through. So let me do one more ribbon stitch, and I'm going to be gentle this time. Need to feel where my ribbon is so that I don't pull it too hard. So there. And sometimes if you come like this, you can get it to straighten out. So I'm going to hold it with my thumb down where I want it, and then I'm just going to pierce through the like that. And it forms a loop. I'm going to let go of my thumb. You can see that curl. I mean, you can leave a really big curl if you want. And I'm just going to pull there. And that is a ribbon stitch. Let's do one more stitch. We're going to take the ribbon stitch up a notch. We're going to come from the back, and we're going to be very gentle. To feel where it is here so I don't pull it out. Okay, and you can still play with it here to see if you can fan it out a little bit and get it to lay a little bit flat if you want. Let me pull this down so you can see. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to twist my ribbon. This twisted ribbon stitch, and you can twist it as much or as little as you like. And so I'm going to, that's a lot of twist, I don't need that much twist, just a little bit of twist. So we'll take a little bit of twist, and we're going to hold it down with our thumb, and then we're going to pierce the ribbon. Well, that looks like a straight stitch. There we go. So I'm going to pierce it right where I want it, and I'm going to pull back through. And I'm going to be gentle. So you can have a wonky stitch. It's twisted. You can twist it as much or as little as you want. What suits your project. Go here, and if I really twist it, you see that? I'm going to pierce the ribbon and go back down. And I can even leave a big knot in the top like that. See that dimension? Or I can pull it harder if I want and just leave just a tiny curl. So it just gives a little bit of extra dimension to your stitches. And when you're done, you just simply tie it off on the back like you would anything else. See if I could flip this over. See if I can do this on camera one-handed. On the back, I would just tie this off by tying a knot. I'm going to anchor it around this one here. And I'm going to hold my stitch with my finger so I don't, just tying a knot. And you really don't need much. You could just, unless you're going to wear it, in which case I would stitch these together with a little piece of thread, just matching thread. I would come up here and put a couple of stitches through here. But other than this, most of the time for silk ribbon, it's not something that's going to have any wear and tear, so you could even just weave your tails under if you wanted. And also for silk ribbon, I wouldn't normally have carried my ribbon all the way across like this. I would have stopped and tied it off and stopped and tied it off. It just conserves a little bit of ribbon. Okay, on to the next stitch. The next stitch is a chain stitch, a detached chain stitch, which is also called a lazy daisy stitch. This one already has kind of an angle cut into it. So again, I'm just going to thread my needle. I think I'm going to thread my needle. Come on. If I feed the pointed part through first, there we go. So once it's threaded, I can hold this in one hand, and I'm going to bring the needle to the short end and pierce the edge just about 1/4 of an inch or so in. Be careful not to get my finger. And then once that's done, once the ribbon is on there, I'm going to pull the long end towards the eye and then give it a good yank, and that locks it on. I'm going to come down the other end, and I'm going to tie just a simple knot. And I'm going to roll this knot down close to the end, like that. And it just, that simple little knot right there will hold the ribbon just fine. The detached chain stitch or lazy daisy stitch is something that you may have already have done. It's a very standard, popular embroidery stitch. So I'm going to come up from the back and I'm going to hold the ribbon in place with my thumb, and I'm going to come up right next to or within the same hole and take a stitch upwards. It could be sidewards. I prefer to do these sidewards, but I have my setup here. Let me go straight. Let me see if I can do this straight. So you take a stitch, so where the needle comes out, you want to make sure your ribbon is around the back of it. You want to go over your ribbon, creating a loop. And I'm going over the top of it, and I'm pulling. And you want to be gentle, and it can curl. It can curl as much as you want it to curl, or not. You can control it and train it. You can get a tool out if you want to. But as you pull, that loop is going to get smaller and smaller. And when it's the place and the size that you want it to be, I'm going to pull a little tighter like that. I am going to finish the stitch by anchoring it by going over the top of the loop and down into the fabric. And that is a lazy daisy. And if your ribbon gets too wound up, you can just drop it and let it unwind and then pick it back up again. You can release some of the curl. So again, we're going to come up at the base of our stitch where we want it to be. And then I'm going to hold this aside and let it make a loop. I'm going to come back into the fabric right next to where I came out. And then I'm going to make my stitch as tall or as short as I want it to be. And when I pull up, I want to go over the ribbon, creating a, well, not pierce it, just go over the top of it. Yeah, you want to be careful not to pierce your ribbon here. And then pull. And I'm just pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling and pulling. And if I pull really tight, not really tight, but fairly tight, not enough to lose the loops. So if that's what I want, then I'm just going to anchor the stitch by coming back down over the loop and pulling my needle through the fabric like that. So that's a detached chain stitch or a lazy daisy stitch. And sometimes it's used as petals, that's why they call it a lazy daisy. Okay, for this last stitch I'm going to go over, it's the woven wheel rose. It's also called a spider web rose, and it's a slightly different stitch, and this is still something that you can do with just floss. But we're going to start off with, I have 2 strands of cotton floss by DMC here. Oops, I got a little fuzzy on the end of that. And I am going to put spokes into this area here that I'm going to weave my ribbon around. The spokes need to be an odd number. Something this small, you could possibly do 3 or 5. It does not matter. But you want to put spokes in with floss. Now, normally you're going to pick a floss that is going to match, and you can, but I'm going to do a contrasting color. Hopefully you can see it a little bit on camera once I start going. And to do this, I'm going to start off with the fly stitch, but you can actually just take your stitches down through the middle until you have 5 spokes. So there I have 2. We're going with it. I wanted to end it somewhere else. So that's 3 spokes. This is 4 spokes. And this is 5, and then I'm going to tie this off at the back. I've got a knot in the bottom of it, and it's locked onto my needle. And then I'm going to come up from the underside very close to the middle of my wagon wheel or my spider web or whatever. So I'm going to come up through the fabric. And then I'm going to go either counterclockwise or clockwise. It doesn't really matter. And I am going to stitch over and under each one of these spokes. So for the sake of this one, let's see if I can turn this a little bit. You can see I have a spoke right here. I'm going to go over this spoke, under this spoke, over this spoke, under this spoke, and over this spoke, and just keep going around and around, alternating over and under until I get to the end. The keys here are not to pierce the threads that you're going over and under, and not to pierce the fabric. So I went over this one, under this one, over this one, under this one, whoops, without piercing anything. Again, over. I'm going to switch hands here. Under this one. And once you're in the middle, you want to pull it just a little tighter. So I went under this one. I'm going to go over this one. Under this one without piercing anything. Under that one, over this one, under this one. over, under. And normally if I were doing this, I would be turning my work so that I'm using my right hand all the time. Whoops, I went off camera. But you just, once it's down in your lap or you're working with it on a different stand or something, you can put it over and under any way you like. Now that might be a little too tight for me. And you can keep a little bit of fluff here. And so I'm under this one. I'm going to go over this one, under the next one, and around until you feel your wheel. And normally you would use a matching color of thread for your spokes so that they won't, if they show just a little bit, it's not a problem. I was hoping to keep the difference, show you the difference on camera. And when you get out towards the edges, you can curl your ribbon a little bit or fluff it or whatever. Let it get a little bit looser if you want to. And you can see down here is I'm starting to lose my spokes, so I have to kind of hunt for it a little bit. So I use the side of my needle to push this up and figure out where my spoke is. And this one I'm going under. So you find your spoke and you go under it. And I'm going to start leaving this a little looser. So I went under, over, and then we have to find our spoke up here. Go under, being careful not to pierce anything. There we go. And I can start to leave this really loose. And if you draw a circle with a pencil or with something else, you won't necessarily see it, but you can keep going around and around until you don't see the outside edge. Make sure I went under that. And sometimes, I'm just going to say, sometimes it might be easier to take the tail end of your ribbon, the eye end of your ribbon, and go under it if you have to go under, because then you won't pierce anything. So you feed it back this way. Or use a tapestry needle if you can, because a tapestry needle's less likely to pierce things. And again, I'm going to fluff it a little bit. That was under. Over. This is another under. The other cool thing that you can do with this is you could actually stop part way through, tie off, and come back up with a different color ribbon and make a multicolor rose or a variegated rose or something like that. You can see we're kind of, whoops. I'm running out of ribbon, so I'm probably going to end this early. That was under, that goes over, that goes under. And I am just about out of ribbon. When you only have a couple of inches of ribbon left, it's time to tie off. So I'm gonna go ahead and to complete the wheel, I'm going to go over this last spoke and then I'm gonna go under here. And then as I'm going under, I'm just gonna pull the ribbon to the back side, like that. And if I need to, I can come back with some more ribbon and finish it. Whoops, let's stay on camera here and finish it. But again, normally I would have used a matching color of floss so that you don't see any of the spokes. The other thing that can be done is you could put a knot in the middle, you could put some beads in the middle. You can do a bunch of different things to make this look cool. Now to finish it off, I'm going to take this off the stand. We're going to come over to the back, and you can see that I haven't gone through except where I originally went to the top. And I can just pull this here and I can tie these two together. So these are some very simple embroidery stitches that you might already know that you can use with ribbon to create beautiful flowers, leaves, and embellishments. The next thing is we will embroider this project here on felt. So stay tuned and let's get to the project. I have created a worksheet that I hope to have on my website. It should be just an easy free download. There'll be a link or a picture or something on my website, that stampjg.com. And it's very similar. I've drawn a similar shape and I've placed the floral elements that I used on this kind of off to the side. It's a little bit bigger than what I'm using here, but I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of space that you could read it. What it shows on this is that the big circle is kind of where I did the spider web, well, it's called a spider mum. It's a twisted kind of a mum shaped flower here. And I wanted the circle to represent the outer boundaries. And then this little woven wheel rose. I'm just going to call it a spider web rose. And an idea for the placement of the lazy daisy stitches, which you can also use is circle punches. So this is a 3/4 inch circle punch, and this is a 3/8 circle punch. I started this by attaching the felt S with just a couple of dabs of craft glue. It does not matter what kind, and it's not, I'm using Gina K Connect. It does not matter, it's just white craft glue. And I just tacked it down in a couple of places. I didn't necessarily want to just use that to attach it, so I just wanted it tacked down without using pins. And then you can take some circles, some hole punches, kind of like that, and trace them with a pencil. The other thing that might work a little bit, I'm going to put this off the S. I want it to be off the S. Here we go. And just kind of have to sketch it a little bit. Felt is notorious for not wanting to accept mediums, but if you have a disappearing ink pen or a washout pen or something like that, that would work too. But you can see that's just faint enough that I should be able to work around it. And that gives me the placement for both of my floral elements. And I'll just have to judge where the middle is on both of them. Okay, to start with, I'm going to work on the woven ribbon rose over here. And I have 2 strands of DMC knotted, and I'm going to put in the spokes of this flower by starting on the outside and creating a Y, come up through the middle. And come back on one side. And come back here from the other side. And that gives me 5 spokes. And again, you want to have an odd number of 3, 5, or 7 usually. Tie this off. And now I'm done with that part. And I have my ribbon threaded onto a needle, and I'm going to come up from the back. Pull. Pull hard. Okay. So I'm going to go in a counterclockwise motion, and I'm going to go over this first one, under this one, over this one, under that one. Staying on top of the fabric and being careful not to pierce the threads as I go through. And I'm going to work my way around and around, going over and under. And I'm going to turn my work as I go. Under, over, under. To begin with, I want these to be a little tight. So that was under, this one has to be over. Having a hard time staying on camera, I'm sorry guys. And that's this spoke and under this one, but I'm having to hunt for this one because it's starting to get full. Make sure I'm not catching the fabric. It's a little hard with felt, I will say that. It's a little bit easier with a flat fabric, but felt's got a lot of texture to it. So sometimes you catch it unawares. And then I need to, there we go, pull this and fluff it just a little bit so that it looks like a rose. And cut off my tails. You can see where I've drawn another circle, and it's meant to overlap the S a little bit. So I'm going to come in from the middle and start anywhere. Does not matter. So I'm going to come in from the middle, and then I'm going to end at the edge with a ribbon stitch. So a ribbon stitch is you have a straight stitch here, and then you're going to poke right through your ribbon on your way back into your fabric. And this is going to create a loop that I'm not going to pull entirely through the fabric. I'm just going to let it sit there like that. And come back in through the middle. And repeat this again. And I'm going to go counterclockwise. This is my tail. And when I pull here, I don't want to pull too tight because I don't want that little curl to disappear into the fabric. So I'm going to hold my ribbon here, and then I'm going to pierce the ribbon on my way back through the fabric. And so when I do that and I let go, I have a loop forming at the top, and I'm just going to stop it there. I'm not going to pull tight so it goes all the way through. It leaves this little curl or knobby kind of thing on the end of the ribbon. If your ribbon gets too curly for a minute, just release it, and then you can start over. And again, I'm going to come in from the middle, and if I can do it on camera, it would be so much better. And in this case, I'm not going to worry so much if I don't come out through the middle hole, because I am going to put some beads in the middle of this. I want that to just pull that gently. And then this round, well, I think I'm going to start doing some twisted ribbon. So I'm going to twist my ribbon. And hold the twist in place. And then when I come back through the ribbon, the edge, I'm going to let that ribbon go for a minute. We have just a little bit. I didn't capture the whole twist, but as you go along, you can twist your ribbon and it would also make a unique petal of your flower. I'm going to come up through the middle, pull gently and not too tightly because I don't want to pull that curl through. I'm going to start twisting this a little bit. And then I'm going to go back through the ribbon right at the edge of the S. So these are all ribbon stitches or twisted ribbon stitches. Okay. And I'm going to come back through the ribbon. And I'm just going to keep going around and around. And my ribbon's getting very short. I probably could have done a couple more inches of ribbon on this. And you know what? I think I'm going to call it. I think I'm going to stop because I've only got couple inches of ribbon left. So I am going to tuck this under a couple of these stitches on the back and then finish it off in a knot. Next item is to put some Lazy Daisy leaves on here with some green. I think I am going to put one Lazy Daisy here. up through the back, hold the ribbon off to the side. Actually, I'm going to turn my piece. That way I can do it this way. So I come up through the back. I'm going to hold the ribbon off to the side, and I've come around my finger, and I'm going to come back where I started. And see where the tip is coming out here? That's going to be the top of my leaf. And so I'm pulling to make a circle. Oops. Pulling to make a circle, and then I'm going to anchor it by going down over the top. Looks kind of like a messy leaf. And make a stitch. Oops. And then to anchor that, I'm just going to come right over the top, down into the fabric. Boy, it's a little too much fabric, so too much ribbon, so I am going to pull this just a little bit. I'm going to pull this stitch here, get a loop just a little bit tighter, and then pull that in. And if I wanted to, I could come up on the top here and just take a ribbon stitch right next to it. And that also looks like a leaf. And tie off on the back. And I'm back with the finished project. I added a few seed beads, some to the middle of the flower and some here and there. And then I stitched the edge of the label with coordinating floss to the cover of my chunky felt needle case. I will link the video in the show notes below to how I created the chunky felt needle case if you're interested. And I wanted to thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope you got inspired to try silk ribbon embroidery. Thanks, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.